Alrighty, folks. Let's get this ball rolling, why don't we? Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our weekly Fionna and Cake discussion live streams. I am once again your humble host, Covey, here to talk about episodes 7 and 8 of Fionna and Cake. I am joined once again by our good friend from across the pond, Tom from Curmudgeon Media. Tom, say hello to the people.
No.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess that's the end of the stream then.
You can't tell me what to do.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Stream over, the end.
Stream over.
Thanks for joining us,
it.
guys.
That's
Hope
the
you
end.
enjoyed it. I hope you had a good time.
Hope you had a good time. Anyway, you're here. Welcome. Thanks so much for being here, Tom, as well as everyone in the chat. All the gang is here. Magical is here. Curmudgeon is also, for some reason, also in my chat in 2 places at once. That's crazy. Shia is here as well. Hello, hello. Toon says, how the heck does this miniseries keep topping itself? I don't know. It's actually insane. These episodes were awesome. I love them. Gay vamps and well-dressed boys. Yes, exactly. Shia. Arblast is here. Hello, hello, hello. And Marcelo is here saying goodbye to Tom. Thanks so much for being here, everyone. I'm so excited to get into these episodes. Before we get into the episodes itself, and Robin is here. Hello, hello, welcome, welcome. Before we get into the episodes themselves, there is something tangentially related that's very important that I wanted to bring up right at the top of the stream here. So as many of you know, all of the animated shows that we love and enjoy are actually made by people, crazily enough.
I don't believe that. I don't believe you. You're lying.
Crazily enough, you just gotta believe me. Trust me on this.
I thought that they just kind of like happened.
Yeah, no. So they are the WBA and Cartoon Network production workers have created a petition online, and I'm gonna go ahead and link it right here in the chat. And these are the people who are creating our marvelous cartoons that we love and enjoy, that we get to come here every week and talk about. So we owe these people a lot. Obviously, they do so much amazing work for us, and they have created this petition to recognize the production workers at WB and Cartoon Network for voluntary union recognition. And so they are sharing this petition around. I've just dropped the link in the chat. So if you are able to, please sign the petition and share it around with all of your friends and your Discord servers and your circles and all that stuff. Like, this is something that's really important and affects all of us who are also animation fans. So
I just signed it just this very second.
Awesome. Good job. So yeah, do that, share it around. It's a good thing. We want to support the people who are making the wonderful shows that we love and enjoy. So thank you for doing that. Thank you, Toon and Magical, as well. Yes. Good.
Everyone's unionizing.
It's great. Excellent. Good job, Shio.
Unionizing.
Great job, everyone.
We should all become one great big union
and go on a big strike. I agree.
I think they call that communism.
Oh my god. Okay, yes. So with that important piece of business out of the way, let's get into these freaking episodes. Man, these episodes were crazy. I love them so much. Before we get into like the nitty-gritty of things, I just want to like acknowledge the really brilliant ways that this show is operating structurally. Like, you all know I am a sucker for like parallel like tangent character arcs that are like reflective of one another, like looking at two characters and kind of being like, what am I supposed to learn here about the differences, about the similarities? And this show is all about kind of like taking two things and putting them next to each other and being like, what are the differences here? What are the similarities here? And why does that matter? Right. And there's so many things in these two episodes that also like call back to the previous episodes and also call back to, you know, obviously previous things from Adventure Time. And Adventure Time as a show has always been really brilliant, and especially being such a long-standing show, right, for 10 seasons, it's always been really brilliant at calling back older episodes and calling back specific moments that are relevant to that episode, right, and what that character is going through in that episode. And so like I can think of several examples from the main show itself that do this, but the Fionna and Cake show continues to do this. And I think like Toon was saying in the chat, like these writers are kind of just like at their peak, right? Like they have kind of been through it. And like I think I saw someone online say too that like the Fionna and Cake writers are like the biggest Adventure Time fans, and you can really see that in the way that these characters are being written, and I absolutely love that.
Well, I mean, you'd hope so. Wouldn't you'd hope they'd at least be somewhat
you would think. Right, exactly. So let's talk about the first episode, The Star. Do you want to do like a brief?
I have some preamble.
Yeah, do your preamble. Let's do it.
Because like before, we talked about this in the first stream, but like before Fionna and Cake actually started airing, when it was just promo images and trailers and stuff, you'll remember I was very, very skeptical going into it. You know, like what are they going to do with Adventure Time now?
Right.
Adventure Time is over. They did Distant Lands. Why do they keep bringing this back? You know, Adventure Time had a not a perfect end, but like a really good, solid, clean ending,
right?
That I really liked, and there's always that concern, isn't there, when something actually has a decent ending, which is rare these days. Like ending a show is hard. Like, finding a way to end a show in a satisfying way is hard. I will say, I feel like Rebecca Sugar's song did most of the legwork.
Oh, absolutely. Did a lot of the emotional heavy lifting.
And I'm like deathly serious. If you took that song out of the episode, it would be like 50% at least less interesting as a finale. But not to diminish the work everybody else did. It was a good finale, but like that song,
really sold it.
Ties it all together.
Ties it all together like, beautifully. Yeah.
It's like the dude's rug. It really ties everything together. But you know, now that we're actually in Fionna and Cake, first of all, I was wrong. I was a dunce. I was an idiot. I was a moron. I was wrong. Because it's been spectacular so far. It's been like easily one of the best pieces of Adventure Time media we've had. You know, much cleaner and more consistent than I think any of the miniseries were, like Stakes and Islands and stuff. And I liked those fine. I thought they were good episodes, but this is significantly, it's like feels so far above all of that. And now we're beginning to get the impression that there actually were loose ends. Even if they're like small loose ends, there were loose ends that the writers never got to tie up. Fionna and Cake being like the big one. Like supposedly this is, you know, where Fionna and Cake came from, and all the stuff with Gizmo is material we now know from interviews
that they had planned.
They had planned ages ago. They'd wanted to cover ages ago, and here we are. That said, these two episodes in particular really feels like we're entering endgame territory. And I don't just mean for Fionna and Cake as a series, because obviously, you know, it's going to be over in a couple of episodes. But I mean, like, this really feels like it's bookending Adventure Time.
Yeah, for sure.
In general. And there are a few things that happen. Like the way that the story is told is so like deconstructive and so
for sure.
Revisionist and subversive for a start. You know, and the way that it's approaching the characters all these years on, it's so subversive. But there are just things happening. I mean, you know, I don't want to get too ahead of myself, but I'm assuming everybody here has actually seen the episodes, and if you haven't,
of course.
What are you doing here?
What are you doing here? Go watch them.
Go watch them. Spoiling everything for you, but right off the bat, like, BMO dies, and I know, like, I know that it's not, and we'll get to this in more detail. I know that it's not like technically BMO because they're different universes.
Alternate universe BMO.
But it still hurts, and it still feels so like real.
The shriek I let out at that moment was like the most ungodly sound.
Because it's like the moment is both funny and horribly sad.
It's horrifying. It's literally like
horrifying. Lowering our little boy into the ground in a box, and it's like, that's my baby, and he's dead. And he's like living alone in this desolate world. And it just, that moment when they killed BMO, that really felt, because BMO was always the one who survived. Like at the end of the show proper, BMO was in you know, when it fast forwards to the future. He's the only one who survives because he's a little robo. He's a little chibi robo. Come to clean up your messes, and he, you know, he's a computer. So as long as his body
pour one out for
works,
BMO,
you know, he'll live forever. But now he's dead, and that just feels so. It just feels like they're winding us down.
Right.
They're putting the Adventure Time fandom down for our final
sleep. I mean, think about what BMO has always represented within the world of Adventure Time, right? Like BMO is childhood innocence, fun, pure imagination, right? Like that is what BMO represents within this world. And like we'll get to it. We're getting ahead of ourselves, but
we're getting ahead of ourselves. But that's the thing. So I mean, where did we leave off? Last time, the last episode was what, the Winter King episode?
Right. Okay.
Which collectively horrified all of us.
Before we get into the Star episode properly, because I have a lot of things to say about the actual episode, because I'm me, and because this is the weekly discussion stream chat, and because we all have our bingo cards out, and because this was a vampire episode, I think we all see what's coming, right? I think we all see where my brain is at and where we're going here. Tom, tell me why this episode was just two of my favorite season 3 episodes of Buffy the Vampire Slayer combined into one episode of Adventure Time. Okay, let me just stand on my Buffy box here for just 1 minute. I'll be quick, I promise. Okay, but there's.
Should I get myself a drink?
Get yourself a drink. Go.
I'm actually gonna do that. I'm thirsty. I'll be back.
Okay, go get a drink. But no, this episode just reminded me of two of my favorite episodes from season 3 of Buffy. There's an episode of Buffy where there's a character that actually makes a wish. She like makes a wish in this episode that Buffy never comes to Sunnydale. And this like actually creates this like wish alternate reality where Buffy never shows up to Sunnydale and vampires have taken over the city, and like all of our favorite characters are like turned into vampires and are now evil. And there's like a van, like a team of white hats like in a van that drive around, and they're like, you know, trying to protect the city without the Slayer, right? Because Buffy didn't show up. And so that just reminded me of like PV and her tank like running around, and I was just like, wow, this is literally the Wish episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And also Graduation Day, because anytime I see two queer ladies fighting each other and one of them is a vampire slayer, at least one of them is a vampire slayer, my mind is immediately going to go to Buffy and Faith. Everything always comes back to Buffy and Faith. Actually, I was trying to figure out if any of the artists on the show, like any of the board artists or any of the crew who worked on this episode, I was trying to figure out if any of them had actually worked on She-Ra in the past too, because if I can make that connection, if I can connect this to She-Ra, then I can connect this back to Buffy. So I just want you all to know that this is where my head is at right now. We all saw this coming. I hope you all saw vampires show up on screen and immediately thought, oh, Covey's going to talk about Buffy on Sunday. So I hope that's where you all knew that this was going.
The second anything even tangentially related to Buffy in any way, really.
Okay,
you enter your magical girl transformation sequence.
Exactly.
And
But did the little van not remind you of like Giles and his little van in the Wish episode? Like, I don't know. It's just maybe I'm just always thinking.
Not really. Not really, I have to say.
That's just me then. Anyway, yes, gay tension, lots of gay tension. We love to see it.
Genshin, if you will. Oh my goodness, is that what Genshin means? Genshin Impact? It's gay tension impact?
Oh my gosh, you figured it out.
Oh my god, we've busted this whole thing wide open.
So the episode starts off right with this flashback, and it again, like, this show is really brilliant in the way that it's like paralleling and referencing like itself, right? And so this opening scene is like paralleling that flashback that we got in the second episode with Simon and Marcy.
I actually had a moment where I downloaded the video and I clicked to watch it and I was like, did I click on the wrong one? Am I watching episode 2 again?
Yeah, it starts off like exactly the same, right? But instead of Simon and Marcy being together, Marcy does in fact find Simon, but oops, he's a corpse. And it looks actually specifically like he did get eaten by a vampire because he has like holes in his neck. And then, of course, we see some shadowy figure, scoop up Marcy, and we find out later that it's most likely the Vampire King who came to adopt her, right? So this is a really interesting, again, we're kind of like looking at two things, right? And saying like, what are the differences here and why does that matter, right? So like the difference with this universe is that Marcy never had Simon, and because of that, it has this like butterfly effect, right? Of now
that
Marcy
leads to like absolute apocalypse.
Right, exactly. Like now Marcy never became a vampire slayer. We have no idea what happened with the humans, right? And we don't know if like the island stuff even happened. We don't know if Finn even, is around. Interestingly, we get Martin in this episode.
We get Martin, yeah. And he's like the best version of Martin we've ever seen. He's actually a good guy.
So something that's really interesting that this episode plays with, right? So kind of in a similar way that like each episode is kind of focusing.
Wait. I'm sorry, I have to interrupt you here.
Sure.
Something sacrilegious has been said in the chat that I simply can't. Marcy's outfits in this episode slay harder than Buffy. I'm sorry, but if you're gonna honestly look me in the eye and tell me that the outfits in anything are better than the outfits in Buffy the Vampire Slayer, then you better be ready to catch these hands.
Yeah, the fashion in Buffy
the Vampire Slayer are outstanding.
Yeah, I love Marceline's outfits in this episode. Don't get me wrong, but you don't come for Buffy's 90s fashion.
You don't get to do that here. We're not gonna let that slide. I'm sorry.
Thank you for acknowledging that, Tom. Thank you. Yes, we would not have let that slide. I loved Marceline's outfits here. The designs are awesome.
Buffy's baby blue.
It's iconic.
Jacket.
Iconic.
You guys can see how I feel about baby blue.
It's iconic.
It's my color.
But
Sorry, I had to interrupt you. It
yes,
was
no,
very
that was
important.
very important. Thank you. What was I even saying? Fuck, what was I saying?
I'm sorry.
I
Shall I
did.
like skip back?
No. I will remember. Marceline, parallels. Okay, yeah, we get this butterfly effect, right? Where Marceline now we don't have the humans, et cetera, et cetera. But so kind of like in a similar way that the episodes previously have done, there is kind of this like central motif that we're getting in each of this episode. In this episode, I felt really focused on parenthood, more specifically fatherhood, right? But of course we get that whole arc with Miss Abadir and Marshall Lee. I feel like the parallels, right, between the A plot and the B plot were a lot more obvious in this one.
Yeah,
You know,
Mrs. Abadir is just like fundamentally just the Vampire King in reverse.
right, yeah, and
In
we're
this
both
case.
kind of looking at Marceline versus Marshall Lee, right, and their upbringing and the way that it's like affected them, and the way that like Simon plays a role in their upbringing, right? Because we've seen in these past few episodes that the stuff that's happening in the episode A plot affects the world in Simon's head, right? We saw the Winter King. It was snowing in, Marshall and Gary's date, right? And like in this episode, Gary has that line where it's like, is this place more gothic than usual, right? And it's because they're like in the vampire world, right? And so it's being affected in real time, right? And we see that also when that moment where Simon's like, you're a bad dad. And we see Gary say, you're a bad mom, right? Like it's happening in real time at the same time. And so like we're seeing the direct effects of Simon's relationship and how that affects Marceline's character. And of course, like internally in the
It's like
Fionna
it's
and Cake
bringing
world.
the magic.
Yeah, that's an interesting way to put it, for sure.
It's
So this,
sort of in a way, not like
yeah,
literally, but it's having that kind of God, what is the term for it? It's at the very least it's turning the world, the Fiona and Cake world, into like an impressionistic depiction of what's going on in his head.
right,
And
exactly, yeah.
what was once like desolate and bleak and sad is sort of regaining a sense of vibrancy to it,
Yeah.
if not magic, but vibrancy.
Yeah, like life, right? Something. Um Yeah, and so we get kind of this like motif of parenthood, and it's so interesting to me that they threw Finn's dad in there too, because
Notoriously like the worst dad of
yeah,
all
like
time, Martin
when
Mertens.
I first saw him, I was like, this motherfucker. Like, what are they doing with this guy here? Like, I can't, like, first of all, I couldn't believe that he was there. It was just like, wow, that's just
I
wild.
liked that he was there. I've been waiting to see how he
And
comes
then
into it
we
because we
get
knew
this,
that he would.
and then interestingly enough, we get this moment with Baby Finn, right? Like Baby Finn ends up like stowing away in Fiona's backpack and coming to this episode, and then he kind of like disappears halfway through the episode, like, and he doesn't come with them to episode 8, right? So he's just sort of abandoned there. And it got me kind of thinking. I was like, why did they do this? Why did they put Baby Finn in this episode? Like, he doesn't necessarily add much other than a couple comedic moments, but there is an important moment, right? With that moment with Martin giving him the beans and him being like, oh, I love this little guy, right? And it got me thinking about this idea of parenthood and like what is this episode trying to say about parenthood. And like I think the way that I interpret it is like, so Martin is this character, right, who was a scummy guy, and then he like tried to turn over a new leaf when he had his child, and then I guess it's up to interpretation, but like the way the show kind of frames it is that like due to circumstances outside of his control, right, he kind of becomes this bad father, right? He like has amnesia, we're supposed to assume, right? And like doesn't necessarily like want to go back to that old life and reverts back to his like con man ways, and it's just like a horrible father, right? But in this
Does
episode,
he have amnesia?
that's the thing, it's never confirmed.
Like it seems he never says he has amnesia. Like he remembers certain things, but he
Right.
just refuses. He's very obtuse about it.
Exactly. So we don't know whether he's even in like in
Like,
Adventure Time. He might like intentionally be trying to avoid Finn, right? Like
yeah, like it's a part of his life that regardless of whether or not he would ever talk about it, clearly causes him a great deal of emotional distress. That's why he doesn't want to talk about it. And he makes a comment to Finn. I think it's the episode when Finn finds him stowed away in a tree on Ooo. And he's like controlling the locals to help him fix his ship.
Right.
And he says to him, just like, that whole part of my life makes me uncomfortable to talk about.
Right. But then here we get this version of Martin in this episode where we kind of have to like think that maybe a lot of the island stuff didn't really happen. Like maybe he never.
It couldn't have done.
Yeah, like maybe he never met Minerva. Maybe like Finn never got born, right? And like maybe he wasn't a con man in this world, right? Like we really don't know what his background is, but we see due to these different circumstances, right? He's actually like a radically different person. Like there's this moment.
Well, we can assume, this is my belief, somebody can correct me in the chat if they want, we can assume that there is a direct connection between The Last Survivors as seen in the Stakes miniseries and the Islands miniseries, right? Because there's this cultural thing on the islands where they all wear
the hats,
hats, yeah, right. Which isn't random, because the where that comes from is the last surviving humans that we see in Stakes.
It protects them from vamps. Yeah,
it protects them from vampires. It's just that first layer of protection.
That's a good point.
In the event that they get caught and bitten. And the implication, I believe, is that they eventually left on that ship that we see in the Stakes series, went away, founded this utopia. But this is a version of the world where Marcy never saved the world from vampires.
Right.
Right? This is where the vampires won. And everyone is dead except for the people we see in that tank. And shrug. The island, that we can presume that the islands miniseries stuff never happened. That like part of the world never became.
So this is like a version of Martin that like didn't go through all of that, wasn't a con man, wasn't like trying to escape this island, right? Like so and there's a moment with him and Fionna where, you know, Fionna obviously in this episode, we'll talk about Fiona's arc in this episode, right? But she's like kind of trying to overcorrect, right, for her mistakes. She's still acting really impulsively and making mistakes. And there's like that moment where she is trying to do good, right? And like it's like, oh, we need to help those people, and she like jumps out of the tank and Martin just like follows along and is like, well, yeah, we should help, right? We should do what we can. And you know, when they think that they're humans, right, he's like genuinely willing to help, and then when it turns out to be vamps and they attack them and like Fiona's in danger, he goes out of his way to save her, right? And in doing so ultimately sacrifices himself, right? Which is something that maybe we wouldn't have got from Martin, our original Martin in Ooo, right? So I don't know, this episode is really it's trying to say something about parenthood. I think that it's like it's trying to say something like parents ultimately are, I think, trying to just do the best that they can with what they have, but it's important to keep in mind, right, that like the effects, because like Simon is going through this like depression where he feels like he has no purpose, he has no value, right? He's like he doesn't belong anywhere, but he has this relationship with Marceline, which he's like almost ignoring, right? He's like, he doesn't acknowledge the impact that his relationship has with Marceline.
I don't think it's that he's ignoring it. It's that we see in episode 2, he feels as though he isn't relevant to her at all.
Right,
and
anymore.
He makes not just anymore.
At
right?
all,
He makes that comment to her in the flashback at the beginning where he says, you don't need me. Like, I need you more than you need me. Like, anybody could come along and just be taken away by how adorable and little you are. Like, you don't need me, but I need you. So, and that's something that's then reinforced later in the episode when he rings her up.
Right.
And she kind of like unintentionally, it's not like she's being malicious or anything, but she's just busy at that time.
Right.
And the unfortunate timing of it, he's just not in an emotionally stable place. So he obviously interprets that as she doesn't really care about me the way that I care about her. And you know, fair enough. What even am I? I'm just like some normal guy.
Exactly.
And then with this episode, the really the emotional core of it for me with this episode was seeing just how important he is as a normal guy, like how just like as a
Exactly.
non-magical entity, because like the Ice King, the mad spirit of the ice in the
Hmm.
crown, was always a threat to Marcy. It was never something that like it's all good and well for him to create this idea in his head that it protected them, and I guess to a degree it did. Um, but it was always a threat to her. It was always something that scared her. You know, the thing that made her who she is, you know, was
Simon.
Simon, this
Yeah.
normal guy, this guy who found a way through all of the madness of living in this like crumbled, broken down society. The thing
Right.
that helped her survive that was specifically the normalcy of
Exactly.
Simon as a
Yeah.
character and his capacity to bring some level of normalcy into her life where she desperately needed it, and helped her to grow up really, really quite, more emotionally healthy than she otherwise would have. And, Cheers, like the Cheers leitmotif is kind of perfect,
Hmm.
because Cheers is just one of those schlubby, prime time American sitcoms that kind of captures the ordinary,
Right.
and he uses Cheers as kind of ironically as a way to escape for her to
Yeah.
escape,
Yeah, for sure.
which is reversed in Fiona and Cake, because they're desperately trying to escape into magic,
Right.
or Fiona is anyway, and Simon wants to return to that. They're trying to escape into the magic, whereas in the episode Simon and Marcy, they're trying to do the exact opposite of that, where
Right.
the magic is this scary, threatening thing in a crown that turns her beloved father figure into a nightmare man, and the magic is a bunch of zombies, and
Yeah.
all they want to do is eat chicken soup and watch old reruns of Cheers that
Right.
he performs for her through the busted out case of an old boxy television set.
Right.
Um, and I really loved seeing that in this episode, that level of fatherhood, that like instinctive kind of fatherhood he has. And we're
Yeah.
beginning, like, that's what we love about Simon. The first time we ever see Simon, not the Ice King, but Simon, is him being a dad, isn't it? It's him giving
Absolutely. Yeah.
ambo to this child. And I loved that.
Yeah.
I loved that so much, and I feel like that's more than a little factor into how like the not magic, but the vibrancy is beginning to come back into the Fiona and Cake world that exists inside of
For sure. For
his
sure.
brain hard drive.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. I really love that. And yeah, it really does like focus on that, his impact with his relationship with Marceline like is so important, right? Like this whole
So
episode is
relevant.
is just to show him like, hey, what you did is important, not just to Marceline but to the entire world, right? And
In a
like
way that the Ice King never could be.
exactly, exactly. And so yeah, this episode is really brilliant in kind of showcasing that, showcasing the value of Simon as he's been minimizing it this entire series, right? And showing like, no, this is actually like you are someone important actually, right? And he's just a normal guy. He's just like a normal regular dude who and like it's so funny because like in that second episode, right, he like even tells baby Marceline like, oh, like you could be with someone who like raises you in a castle and like takes care of you, and it's like, well, here's what that version of that looks like, right? And it just
It's not
goes,
a good
it's not a
castle.
good
That's a Dracula castle. That's a creepy castle.
yeah. So I really love that we're getting that kind of side of Simon, and hopefully that's something that he takes away by the end of the series. I feel like he hasn't quite internalized that in this episode, right? Because of course by the end of episode 8 he's still intending to put on the crown. But I really hope that him and Marceline just get a conversation at some point by the end of the series so that he can really like be told right to his face, like, no, fucker, you're important to me. And I care
In those
about you.
exact words.
Exactly. If anyone's going to drop an F-bomb in this show, it has to be Marceline. Let's be real.
I've been thinking, I've been saying that since the start. I think they get their one F-bomb, and if anyone's gonna say, it's gonna be Marceline, and if it's not Marceline, I'm gonna be angry. And the Cartoon Network can expect a very strongly worded letter from me in the mail.
Yeah. For sure. How do we think that Simon influencing Fiona's world is a clue to her world? Oh, hold on. How do you guys see Simon influence Fiona's world as a clue that her world will keep being in his head or transfer? Honestly, I have no idea what's going to happen at the end here. I don't know. I feel like I have no prediction for how this is going to end. Whether Fionna and Cake's world is going to stay in Simon's head, whether it's going to be moved somewhere else, maybe added to the multiverse. I have zero prediction for any of that stuff. What's going to happen? Yeah, I have no clue.
I also have no clue. I want a happy ending, obviously.
Right. It's gonna be
But
bittersweet in some way, shape, or form. It's not gonna be completely happy. There's no way.
We don't really know that either, is the thing. Like, at the moment, it could go any way. It could be one of those things where they've made us suffer enough and they'll actually give us a wholly, completely earned happy ending.
Yeah.
They could give us a wholly miserable, sad ending where the Fionna world fucking goes away and they're all dead forever. I don't know.
Yeah, I really
We'll
don't
see.
know. They did some really interesting stuff with Betty in episode 8, and I have some kind of hot takes, which I think, Tom, you'll see where I'm coming from, but I haven't seen anyone else really talk about this, but we'll get to it. We'll get to it. I'm getting ahead of myself.
Yeah, there's the way the romance between Betty and Simon is written is like
We'll get there. We'll get there.
it's
Don't get
it's
ahead.
like it's like okay.
Don't get ahead. We'll get there. We're still talking about vamps. We're still talking about vampires. So yeah, this episode about fatherhood, parenthood, right? And of course, we're getting this B plot with Marsha Lee and Gary, right? That like ties into this, and we're seeing the parental figure of Miss Abadir, trying to influence Marsha Lee, right, in the same way that like Vampire King. And it's I love this like vampire motif that we've got going on too, with like the blood drive and all this stuff, right? But it kind of like adds to this idea of like leeching of life, right? Like parents kind of like living vicariously through their children, right? And like making their children like proxies for themselves, right? Extensions of themselves, right? Is this like very vampiric idea of like, I'm gonna suck the soul out of you, right? And you're gonna become part of me and part of my army, right? And so Marsha Lee is like becoming succumbed to this like vampiric business deal, that like family business, right? That like his mom wants him to be a part of. And but he's like making the sacrifice, right, for Gary. But then Gary like sees what he's doing, and because he also cares about Marshall, he's not gonna stand for it. He's not gonna let him.
I love that bit when he's like, what is it he says? Like there's whatever she's gonna put you through isn't worth whatever this creep can do for me.
Right, yes. And
so it's Marsha. It's like dude Marsha.
Yeah.
And he's like, hey.
It's great. I love seeing all the
come on, man.
All the gender bent versions and the blood drive. Actually, like there were a few I recognized. I saw a gender bent version of Magic Man there, which was fun. Ricardio, the heart guy, was there. Right?
Ricardio. What would the female Ricardio be?
Oh, I don't even know.
Can we also acknowledge that Mrs. Abadir is hot?
She got the cheekbones. Got them sharp cheekbones.
Like, she's got that same level of like weird, bendy eccentricness.
She's got the like
eccentricity. Would that be the word?
Yes, that's the word. Yep. Yeah.
And, she's great. I think she's wonderful.
Yeah. And I love imagining too, right? Because we got from an interview that Gary and Marshall's story here is very kind of parallel to, Marceline and Bubblegum in their first meeting, right? So I love this idea of just imagining like, Bubblegum, she's trying to like establish her kingdom and get the ball rolling, right? And maybe Marceline's like, oh, I have this like all-powerful demon dad who can help, but then like PB's like, no, I don't want your demon help to set up my kingdom, right? I don't know. It's just like kind of fun to think about. But seeing this relationship, right? I think the thing that this episode had the most fun with, in my opinion, was playing with Marsha Lee and Gary, and then of course Princess Bubblegum, Bonnie, and Marceline in this episode. And of course, like the star, right, is such a nice callback to the Stakes miniseries with the tarot cards, which is so cool. And I also just like, I have a note here that I think like is, again, it's just, this is just always in the back of my head because I mentioned last week that I've been kind of thinking about this like trans reading of Fiona in the back of my head. And it's just very interesting to me how in this alternate universe where we see like evil Marceline, right? Who's like this gothic, hyper feminine, she's got these like frills and dresses and jewelry and stuff. And then we see on the other end of the spectrum, this like butch, white hat mercenary,
Honestly, one of the hottest versions of bubblegum we've ever seen.
right, with like the buzz cut and everything. And so I just like how this alternate universe is playing with like gender presentation and just sort of like playing around with that. I just think it's fun to me, and I love to see it. And I love the way that they've like just implied the backstory between Bonnie and the star in this alternate universe, right, where there's clearly some history going on there. Bonnie knows Marceline's real name. She's like, how do you know the star's real name, right, when Simon like says her name. And that moment too when Simon's like, in my universe you two were in love,
yeah.
And she's got the knife up against his neck, and you can see like all these emotions going through her, right? Like, and it's like she's angry about hearing that, she hates the star, but on some level I feel like she wants that, right? She like wants to be in that universe where they're in love with each other.
As Kate Bush would say, I hated you, but I loved you too.
Exactly. So I love the way that they've just like implied this kind of like, they do care about each other, right? And like at the end with the fight when Marceline's like, you could join me, and Bonnie's like, she doesn't say no, I won't join you. She's like, what's the point, right? Yeah, there's a moment where she's like considering it, right? And you're just like, the toxic Yuri, we love to see it. It's just so much fun, and I love seeing this this inverted version of the relationship where they still obviously deeply care about each other, but because of the Vampire King now raising Marceline to be, his right-hand man, they can't have their traditional romance. But it's just, I love that, it's like lovers to enemies almost, I feel like, is what is kind of implied with their relationship there, which is just a lot of fun. It was fun to see. I love the dramatics of it all. Like that moment right at the end where they're like diving to their death, and it's like, if you poof me, you're dead too. And the vampires are all like reaching for them. It's just like the epic moment. And meanwhile, Gary and Marshall Lee are making out in the elevator.
I love that is such a Blade Runner ending.
Yeah.
Get out your bingo cards, everybody.
Bingo cards.
You have to admit, the Blade Runner 1982 has an iconic ending where Rachel and Deckard leave in the elevator, and the elevator doors close and cut to credits.
Yep.
And it's like what's gonna happen to him? We don't know. What's the future? And it's like that. The elevator doors closing as they kiss. Love it.
Yeah. It's great. Yeah, I love the way that they played with the relationship here. It was just so much fun. It was just pure fun, and I loved it.
We just need Infinity Train and Bebop. I don't think I have any specific Bebop connections, but we've been talking about this show feeling a lot like Infinity Train in nature. Because it feels like it's a seasonal arc pushing its characters towards a single emotional realization. That said, the more that we get into this, the more it feels like Over the Garden Wall to me, rather than Infinity Train, because it's got that one-shot status of Over the Garden Wall, and the way that the slightly more episodic nature of it compared to Infinity Train, and the way that it bounces back and forth between certain like flashbacks and stuff, and the way that they're going between these worlds feels a bit less eclectic than Infinity Train does on an episode to episode basis.
Sure.
And the fact that obviously it shares certain like staff members with Over the Garden Wall, no doubt affects that as well.
Totally. Yeah.
June, how on earth am I going to make this about Taxi Driver? How can I do that?
I love that our chat just like knows us so well at this point. They're just like, when are they gonna bring up Taxi Driver?
I have standards, okay. Yeah, actually, I could. There is one way that I could, and that is Martin Mertens is wearing an M65 field jacket, which was that was a Vietnam infantry jacket, and it in the post-Vietnam period, everybody's going to be so bored. In the post-Vietnam period, it was a very popular male fashion item, and it still is today, but it was popularized by the success of Taxi Driver because he
There
wears
you
it in
go.
that.
Are you happy
There you
now,
have it.
chat? Are you
It's
happy?
and Martin's one with the great big the rank on the arm is very very similar specifically to the one that Travis Bickle wears in Taxi Driver. Deliberate connection? I don't know. Taxi Driver is one of the most beloved famous films ever made, so it's possible.
There you have it, chat. Are you
Don't rule it
satisfied?
out. I have a question for you though, and a question for chat if chat wants to answer,
Yeah.
if they feel like answering. Who are some gender bent versions of characters that we have not seen yet, but who you would like to see?
Good question.
Sound out in the chat.
Good question. I have to think about that. Let me think about it. I'll get back to you. There is one more thing I want to talk about in this episode, and that is
I have an answer to that question. Don't move on.
Fine.
Too
Sorry.
fast.
What's the answer?
You're gonna laugh at this. It's so dumb. I want to see Tiny Manticore.
Okay, yeah, that would be very good.
Like we've seen. I want to know what a human Tiny Manticore would look like. We've seen all these other characters turned into. We've seen fucking Ricardio turned into a human somehow.
True.
Where's Tiny Manticore? Where's the Tiny Manticore representation?
True.
And
We haven't seen the James Baxter horse show up. That'd be fun.
Jane Baxter.
Jane Baxter, yeah.
And she would have to be voiced by James Baxter's wife.
Yes, that would be amazing.
which would truly be wonderful. I'd love to see that.
That would be incredible. Oh my god, yeah. There's so many characters that would be just so fun to come back. I want to talk a little bit about actually. Oh yeah, Huntress, Wizard, Hunter again. Yeah, we need to have more time with them. They're very good.
I asked about
new characters
we haven't seen.
Let's see. Oh, have we seen Root Beer Guy yet? I want to see Root Beer Guy and his wife, gender bent.
Oh my goodness. James Baxter's wife did all the cleanup work for his animation for the episode James Baxter the Horse.
Chords, I believe the lady Rainicorn gender bent is the candy shop owner that Gary goes to.
The candy shop.
That Gary goes to in episode 6. I believe that's the gender bent version of Lady Rainicorn is the candy shop.
I loved that. This like weird back alley candy store.
Yeah. Actually, since you brought up
candy is not the only thing they sell there, let me tell you.
Oh my gosh. Anyway, going back to the episode, since you brought up the jacket, I actually do have a note here about the jacket, and that kind of also ties into my greater point about Fiona's arc in this episode. So that kind of is a nice segue there. But I did think it was interesting to me how, Fionna takes Martin's place, by the end of this episode, and they give her the jacket. And, to me, Fionna, she's kind of been like carrying these things as she's been going across all these universes, and now she has this jacket and she's got this like weight that is being added to her, right? Like she's got this guilt of the people she's hurting, and that's what's like deciding her actions. So I kind of saw the wearing of this jacket as like almost her hanging on to this guilt over like the harm that she's caused. And also I thought it was just kind of a poetic moment of like, Fionna is technically a version of Martin's child, right? And so they do in a very indirect way have this like familial relationship. And this whole episode is kind of centering around this parental theme. And we get this moment of like passing down this jacket, passing down this title, right? To like your daughter, your weird indirect daughter in a way. And I just thought that was kind of poetic, and it kind of added to this motif of parenthood and kind of what can we do for our children in a weird way, right? And I guess it's just dying and giving him a jacket if that's the best you can do in that moment.
Yeah, it's the first time we see that jacket appear is the very same episode I mentioned before, when Finn finds him stowed away in a tree.
Exactly,
And
yeah.
he's wearing that jacket, and it's tied up above the elbow to give the illusion that he has lost the arm in the crash.
Right, yeah.
So the jacket, in conjunction with that image, is a very purposeful piece of imagery. It creates it evokes sympathy by calling upon the same imagery you would associate with a wounded soldier, or like a homeless veteran, perhaps somebody who's been injured fighting a war. They've come back. They're homeless. They're missing an arm. Which kind of plays into a lot of what the famous imagery is with that jacket in film in general, because the M65 field jacket is obviously a popular item of clothing, but it's a very famous like piece of mise en scène, basically, like a metaphor in films that it's used in. So that obviously you've got Taxi Driver, where the moment in the film where he puts that jacket on is basically the moment where he's gone completely down the rabbit hole. And it's coded in a sense that his experience in Vietnam, doing like 2 or 3 tours in Vietnam, has affected him emotionally and psychologically. There's a lot of deep PTSD there. So him wearing that jacket is like him succumbing to that. But you see it in other characters too, like in Fargo with Hansi Dent. Hansi Dent, it's 1979, and Hansi Dent, this Vietnam vet, is still wearing his 65 field jacket. All these years on, he's still wearing his Vietnam jacket, which plays into that fact that war never really left him, and he never left it.
Right.
And it's like, it's basically what I'm getting to is the idea that the jacket is itself a manifestation of trauma.
For sure, for sure.
Which I can't help but think of that when we see that image of Fiona in the opening credits wearing that jacket, walking through the desolate landscape and crying.
Absolutely, which is what we get in this next episode, right? And yeah, I do want to talk a little bit about Fiona's arc here, because she we've seen throughout these first several episodes up till episode 6, right? She's the type of person who wants to escape into fantasy. She's like unwilling, right, to engage with reality on a real level. And it isn't until there's a funny parallel that I noticed as well in episode 6 later after a discussion stream, where in the first episode, right, we open with a dream sequence of Ice Prince turning into an alarm clock and waking Fiona up out of her dream. And then in episode 6, we get, the kiss with the Winter King, who turns into dust and is now waking Fiona up out of her fantasy, right, of this like dream that she was living in, right? And so I love that parallel. I didn't notice that when we first talked about it last week, but something I wanted to bring up.
Doesn't BMO turn into an alarm clock?
We'll get there. We'll get to BMO. But
my son,
my child,
my sweet boy.
But Fiona, she is finally snapped back to reality in a
Whoop,
sense,
there goes
right?
gravity.
Whoop, there goes gravity, and she is now trying to figure out how to engage with reality, right? And she can't figure it out, right? She keeps overcompensating. She thinks she's doing the right thing. She has good intentions, but she keeps making mistakes. And the root of her mistakes really come from her inability to communicate her feelings and to communicate what she's thinking and where she's at and what she's experiencing. And it's that it's that inability to engage with reality in a concrete way that is hindering her. And we'll get to that a little bit more when we get into episode 8 and the way that she's coping with her feelings of conflict there. But it's just interesting to me also, and I really love the dynamic we're also getting between Fiona and Cake and their friendship too, right? Where Cake is also kind of being developed as this character where she, at the beginning of this series, we saw her kind of struggling to get control of her powers. And now in this episode, she's a lot more confident and she wants to use her abilities to actually help them. And meanwhile, Fiona is witnessing all this death happening around her, right? With Martin and like in the last episode,
Nemo.
and she's feeling overprotective and wants to keep Cake safe, but Cake wants to show that she can, you know, be helpful, and we get this tension here, right, between Fionna wanting to protect Cake but not being able to like articulate that, right, and just sort of like taking these actions without communicating them and being like very impulsive, and that ends up kind of being detrimental to both of them at the end, right? So I love the way that their arc is going, and I'm so curious to know how it's going to change once they go back into their world, right?
Well, we don't know if that's gonna happen, do we? Specifically, we don't see them re-enter their world. We see them
Yeah.
enter Simon's head,
Yeah, so we
and
don't
then we
really
see
know how it's going to
Simon.
play out.
Then we see Simon fall into a magical pit. So we don't know for sure if they've actually gone back at all.
Yeah.
Still got 2 episodes left to go. So
Yeah. Yeah.
what do we think about Jerry? That guy seems kind of sus.
Fucking Jerry, man. Let me just say, I am so glad that like I didn't remember the Lich episode from season 4 or 5, whatever it was. I'm so glad that I watched this with my brain completely off, because when the Jerry reveal happened at the end of the episode, I was so freaking shocked. I was so surprised, and it like completely took me aback. And rewatching the episode, it's so obvious. It's so obvious they're in the Lich world right from the beginning. And I'm so glad I didn't notice it and I didn't realize it until I watched it again the second time, because if I had like noticed it and been like, oh, this is the Lich world, I feel like that surprise was just really fun and really got me.
I watched the show recently as well. It didn't occur to me Jerry was the Lich.
Yeah, but like it's so obvious when looking back now, right? When Bimo is all like, and then everyone turned into a skeleton, and then Jerry showed up. It's like that's literally what happened, beat for beat, what happened. And you know, we saw that moment as well. I don't know if you caught this, Tom, but with the Ice King's tapes, right? When they're watching them, there's like those 2 frames right at the end of the tape. He's a skeleton. Yeah,
I literally, Toon can vouch for me here. I literally screen capped that and immediately sent it to him. Like, what the hell?
What is happening? Yeah.
Jerry's not okay. I don't feel like Jerry really thought any of this through. He's not the Lich anymore, by the way. He's Jerry.
He's Jerry now. Yeah.
Why is the Lich called Jerry? Because Bimo's a little friend.
Bimo is a friend, yeah.
Bimo's just a little friend and just decided to call him Jerry. You can picture the conversation, can't you? Because the thing is that Bimo doesn't constitute life. The Lich is like a machine.
Yeah.
Right? The Lich contains no malice. The Lich just exists to destroy, like a machine. It's like it's a virus that's been programmed to do that. Yeah. Right? And Bimo doesn't constitute life. Bimo, not to the Lich anyway. Bimo's
inorganic. Yeah.
You know, so you can imagine Bimo finding the Lich kind of sitting there and just being like, "Hey, how's it going?" And the Lich just like not responding. And then Bimo doing what Bimo does, which is just...
I'm gonna call you Jerry, right?
You're Jerry now. Now we're best friends.
We saw that with that episode, right? When he's like with the bubble and the baby, and he's like, I'm gonna call you Ricky, right? Like he just names things. Like that's just what he does. He's my child, and I love him, and I miss him, and I'm crying.
But it makes me laugh, because it's like the Lich didn't really think any of this through, and now he's kind of depressed, because like the only thing he cares about in this world is destroying things.
Yeah.
Now he's destroyed everything, and he's like, oh wait, now I don't have anything to kill, unlike my entire reason to exist.
Yeah, I do want to talk about the Lich, both as a metaphor and also like, you know, functionally within the lore of the show. There's a couple things I have to say here. So first of all, metaphorically, the Lich, right? I feel like obviously we get this line from Simon where he's like, oh, I think he's depressed too, right? Like, so obviously we're getting these parallels again, right? We're getting so many of these characters that have parallel arcs, right? And so the Lich is this single-minded, single goal-oriented being, right? He wants to extinguish all life. And in this universe, this is the version, right? This is the way it connects back to Adventure Time. This is the version of the Lich that we actually saw in whatever, season 4 or 5, whatever it was, where he wished to extinguish all life. And we were thinking back then, oh, Jake just undid his wish and it never happened. But turns out every wish actually does create an alternate reality, and this is that reality.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so that's awesome, first of all, that callback and that like kind of reveal that this was like that Lich, right? Because he's still wearing like Billy's skin and everything, which is just awesome.
I mean, to be fair, who hasn't worn Billy's skin?
It's quite fashionable.
Very fashionable.
S-
Warm.
so we see the Lich has accomplished his goal in this universe, right? And it's been like what, maybe 15 years or something like that since he's extinguished all life, and he's just like sitting here in this empty, desolate land with only Bimo there to keep him company. And he is quote unquote depressed, right? And to me, I read this as, like when you are a person and you have like a single goal, and your entire life's purpose and your self-worth is like tied up in this goal, and whether or not you accomplish that goal is irrelevant, but like once you're on the other side of it, what do you do with yourself, right? Like what?
It's like, it kind of reminded me of the ending of The Graduate.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. That's a great movie.
The Graduate's a masterpiece. They're getting to the end of The Graduate, and they've done the one thing they wanted to do, which was rebel against their parents. And then they're sat there on the back of the bus like, oh, we just did that, huh?
Yeah. And the way that I kind of interpret it too, and maybe this is just
Sorry to interrupt. Just Toons made a thing about Finn leaving Bimo a BRB note. That is from a specific episode, and like I can't remember which one it is. I'd have to go back and really think about it. But that is from a specific episode.
yeah.
From Adventure Time proper, and I believe even in Adventure Time proper, that note never gets picked up. Like they write that note, and then it's always there in the background after that point, I think.
Yeah, I feel like there were a lot of background
So that's
details both
continuity.
in the treehouse and like in the Candy Kingdom in this episode that reference the earlier seasons of the show. So I feel like that is all to imply that this is the Lich wish timeline, right?
Tia, are you saying that the Lich is a simp for Golb?
So I interpreted the Lich as almost like a Jeff Bezos or like an Elon Musk like figure.
Oh, no, come on now. There's no need to do the Lich dirty like that.
Fair
Come
enough,
on.
fair enough. But I imagine the Lich as like, as a proxy for like a metaphor for real world like billionaires, right? Like the people who have this like single-minded goal, and they don't care if they've extinguished all of the environment and life to accomplish their goal. But like what do they even get at the end of that, right? Like I'm not a billionaire myself, surprisingly enough, but in my eyes, I feel like billionaires are very sad people, and they just have like this emptiness in their heart that like cannot be filled.
I don't think they're sad people. I think they're perfectly content with being awful bastards, but their existence is sad.
Yes.
Or would be sad from the perspective of people who have a conscience, which they don't.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So I sort of
if they woke up one day and suddenly grew a conscience, they'd be like, "Oh, wow, how do I live with the things that I've done to get here?"
Right. And so I see the Lich as like you've accomplished all your goals, you've accomplished like the greatest feat that you have set out to do, but now what, right? Like what do you even do with that at this point, right? And especially because there's literally no one to share it with, right? And it's just completely empty, and it's sad.
He just wanted someone to share his victory with.
Exactly.
Damn, I've extinguished all life, and I ain't got nobody to like give me a pat on the back for it.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Lore-wise, I thought it was kind of interesting, to kind of get into like the theory section of it a little bit. Like I thought it was kind of interesting that he didn't actively like want to kill them, or didn't want to try to figure out some way to continue his journey to extinguish all life. Well, yeah, there's that implication that he's like depressed and doesn't care anymore, but also there's like Simon has this line too where he says that the Lich is a scholar of Golb, right? So like in some
he's always described, like the Lich has always described himself as the last scholar of Golb.
Right, exactly. But Golb is fundamentally different now because of Betty. So I'm like thinking, like, is it because of Golb and is it because of Betty that the Lich is kind of like deactivated? I don't know. Like, is there a connection there maybe?
He's not deactivated, is he? He comes back into business when, like, right at the end.
Does he? I don't know how to interpret that.
You see, like once he realizes that a portal has been opened, he wants access to the multiverse, really. He wants to be able to destroy life in all universes. That was kind of, we see him try to do that, like the way his hand got dropped into the pool of universes, and there's like a version of him in every universe. It was all part of his plan. Like, that's what he wanted to do.
Right.
And now that Simon has demonstrated he has the capacity to do that, all of a sudden gives old Litchy Boy a little chub on, a little chubster.
No.
Gets him a little excited.
I don't know. I hate that.
Hey, you're the one who said bestie from another testy. You don't get to give me crap.
Fair enough. No, but I don't know how to interpret that thing so at the end, right? We see they open the portal right as the scarab is trying to go after Simon. We see the Golb show up in the Lich's eyeball. But I interpreted that as Betty working through the Lich, but the Lich is still kind of like stationary. I guess that's how I saw it, but I don't know. Maybe the Lich is reactivated and coming back at the end in some way, shape, or form. I really don't know.
Oh yeah, I hadn't really thought about that. It would be really funny if Betty is just totally normal, but she has the body of Golb now. Like, except for that, she's just like completely regular.
Yeah. Yeah, so I saw that as and also because like I'm trying to connect it back, like because in the finale of Adventure Time we saw Betty wear the crown and her wish was to keep Simon safe, right? And in doing so she did fuse with Golb because she couldn't destroy Golb. So
to be fair, we've all fused with Golb at least.
We've all been there.
Yeah. It's embarrassing and most people would deny it, but let's be real, fellas.
And so as Simon is like putting on the crown at the end of the episode and as the scarab is like about to kill him, we see Betty intervene and open this portal. So I'm wondering, like, is that connected to the wish she made somehow to protect Simon, right? Like to keep him from putting on the crown again.
It's ambiguous, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because like, did Betty open that portal? Or did Simon open that portal? I mean, that's why he knows that spell. Right?
Yeah,
that's what he was always trying to do from the start.
And we actually see...
But we know, hang on. We know that something was missing, right? Hence, he was not previously able to do it. Like, he had the magic battery, he had the spell, but something was missing.
He was thinking of Fionna and Cake. And in this moment, in this episode, he was thinking of Betty. We saw, the little spark, right? When in the flashback, when she's like, goodbye, Simon. And we see that spark, and that's kind of what ignites the whole thing. So yeah, I think it's because he was specifically thinking of Betty. And maybe because of Betty also intervening because of her wish to keep Simon safe. I think it could be both, right? It could be multiple pieces.
The ambiguity seems purposeful.
Exactly. Yeah, I think it's meant to be kind of whatever.
And... It's interesting, isn't it? Because we can draw another parallel to episode 2 in terms of the way that Finn interacts with Simon compared to the way that Fionna interacts with Simon. Because obviously, like, Finn is not a complicated man. And as soon as like Betty comes into the conversation, Finn doesn't do really what needs to be done, which is to encourage Simon to talk about it. Because Simon is like doggedly pursuing this idea of Betty, but he's also like simultaneously burying Betty deep into the vault of his mind.
Yeah.
Where he doesn't want to talk about her. He doesn't want to think too hard about her because it hurts.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Where he's succumbing only to his worst tendencies. Whereas in this case, Fionna is like, no, I want to hear about it. So it's good to talk about it. Talk about
I want to get into Simon and Betty. Can we get into Simon and Betty?
I want to get into bed, please. No, I'm kidding. Talk
okay,
y'all. Simon and Betty.
I'm gonna have a hot take about Simon and Betty, and Tom, I feel like you're gonna see where I'm coming from. And
I'm probably gonna at least partially agree with you.
I don't know. I don't know if it's because the two of us are just a couple of cynical bastards or what, but I feel like you're gonna see where I'm coming from, and you're gonna partially agree with me. But Simon and Betty, they've got this romance. They've got this, we get a flashback in these episodes, and everyone is watching these flashbacks and they're like, wow, they're so cute. They've got this romance. It's so beautiful. The animation is amazing. And I completely agree that it's beautiful and it's all lovely to watch and look at. And the music is amazing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I don't think we're supposed to be coming away from these flashbacks thinking that this was a wholesome, functional, happy relationship. I think that because of the way these flashbacks are framed, specifically the way that they're framed, is supposed to indicate to us that there is some underlying problematic nature with their relationship that is going to be explored more in these next final episodes.
It's something that's already, to a degree, been explored in some sense, because these two people are like dangerously codependent.
Yes.
You know,
yeah, go ahead.
They're like, sorry, I have to plug my laptop in. They're like nothing without each other. You know, when one of them turns into a mad god, the other like drives himself crazy and depressed trying to fix them, and vice versa. Like, they are dangerously codependent. And they, you know, the idea of Betty giving up her life and like valuable opportunities to like be with this guy, this like, weirdo, which is good for neither of them. You know, and it leaves them both in a situation where when the other's not there, they lose any sense of perspective or meaning in their life.
And we've seen that even throughout Adventure Time, right? In the original series.
Exactly, with Betty trying to fix Simon to her own detriment.
I have a bunch of pieces of evidence here that I want to go through to kind of support my point here. Again, I really think it is specifically in the framing of these scenes, and I want to dig into it a little bit more, because I haven't seen too many people talk about this, and I think the way that they did this is really brilliant. So I want to dig into it. First of all, right at the beginning, when we first start going into these flashbacks, right, we are introduced to this flashback at a campfire. Where have we seen a campfire before in the series? In episode 2, when Finn and Simon go off on their little adventure, right? As Finn is trying to comfort Simon and make him feel better through this coping mechanism that Finn is, this is his only coping mechanism, right? Is to go on an adventure.
He does not know how to do anything else.
And does it work for Simon in that episode?
No,
it doesn't. Does it work for Fionna in this episode? No, it really doesn't, does it? And so I love the way that this campfire scene right at the beginning, right, is calling back to that moment of episode 2 where, you know, Finn was trying to comfort Simon with his only method of coping, which is going on an adventure. And now Simon is trying to comfort Fionna with his only method of coping, which is escapism into the past, right? Which is exactly what he's doing. So that's the first point, that I think that we're not supposed to be, you know, thinking of this reminiscing as necessarily a good thing, because of that campfire parallel. Second point, we find out, and of course we've known this from the original series, that Simon in his original life was a hunter of mythological artifacts, right?
He was, in his own words, an antiquarian.
Yes, exactly. And I feel like you could interpret that as he was always a character that was kind of chasing a fantasy in a sort of way, right? Literally no one else in his reality like believed him, and he was the only one like in this own world where he was so committed to it. And the only person that was willing to go along with him, right, was Betty. And so I feel like this is a really key characterization for both of them, where they are the only two people who like believe in this fantasy and are willing to like chase this, like sacrifice like so much stuff, right? They're sacrificing their reputation, their like academic standing, right, for this pursuit of like the fantastical. And so like both of these characters are people who are willing to chase the fantastical and like sacrifice reality for the sake of the fantastical, right? So that's another point which I thought was interesting.
Well, that's, to be fair, were they wrong to do that? Because it turns out all of those artifacts
fair enough
exist. Like, I don't know if it's necessarily quite so cut and dry as that. I think
no. I just think it's an interesting point.
I think it's fair, at least, to admit that they have a shared passion, and it was not necessarily wrong of them to pursue that passion. The difficulty is that they get their selfhood all tangled up in it.
And yes, I completely agree. And then in that scene too, right, where we see Betty, you know, go up to Simon and she's like, oh, you know, I believe you, blah, 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 right? She's like, she calls him like the Simon Petrikov, right? Like she has this like version of him, I feel, in her head where she's like kind of over romanticizing him a little bit. You know, she sees him as this like brilliant scholar, and she like you know, when he's like, oh, you should come on the expedition with me, right? She's like, well, I was gonna go do this expedition, et cetera, but this once in a lifetime opportunity with the Simon Petrikov, right? Like, this is a man that she doesn't even know whatsoever, right? But she has an idea of him already in her head, and because of that idea, she's willing to sacrifice, right, this thing that she already had in order to pursue this relationship with this person that, again, she doesn't know. She doesn't actually know. She only has an idea of in her head.
To be fair, I want to go on an adventure to find a crown.
To be fair, yes,
I want to
that's
go on an
completely fair.
archaeological adventure to find. I want to go Indiana Jonesing with somebody.
Yeah, exactly what Robin is saying in the chat. She's basically putting him on a pedestal. I think that's a really good way to put it, for sure. My next point, my next piece of evidence that their relationship is messed up. There's a very specific visual language that is being used with all of these flashbacks here. And I thought it was incredibly intentional. And I don't think that it was just done to make these memories pretty and to make us feel a certain way. I think that it was done specifically to convey a certain. So yeah.
Very. Do you mind if I?
Please.
It's very, very Sailor Moon coded.
For sure.
Which makes it dreamlike.
Yes, that is exactly the word I have.
Very dreamlike, and that again is purposeful because they already did that in episode 1 with the literal dream.
Yep.
But they're bringing that same visual language back to create this like unreality that they.
It's a little hazy. It's a little, specifically, it's also a little rose tinted.
Yes, it's got that. That's the Sailor Moon coding. It's slightly purple.
Exactly.
It's got those bokeh lights. Everything's out of focus.
Yes. Little blurry, little dreamlike. Yeah. So I think the visual language as well too is supposed to convey to us, right, that maybe that, you know, we're looking at these memories through a little bit of a rose tinted lens, right? Like maybe we're looking at this with a little bit of nostalgia, a little bit of romanticization, right? And it kind of just calls back and reminds me of the Winter King's line, right? When he's like, that's not how I remember the relationship, right? Because like there's all these little things that it's just like, well, that doesn't quite sit right? And it's just like this romanticization of the relationship to me is really interesting. And I think the visual language conveys that as well too.
Kind of makes you wonder if we'll get to see like the real version of it, like how it actually happened.
Right. Like like in the first memory where they're like crossing the rocks with the snakes, right? Before we actually pan to Betty and Simon, there's like an establishing shot where we see these like two little birds like walking by, and it's like very obviously a male and female coded bird, right? And like that just seems like so fantasy, right? Like it's like that didn't happen. That's not real. That's a romanticization of like what that memory could have been, right? And so I just thought that those little visual details were so intentional, right? And so fascinating to add to this this feeling of maybe we're romanticizing the past a little bit. When Betty says goodbye to him, even throughout the all of these flashbacks, really, like she is never quite able to express, and neither is Simon, but they're not quite able to express how they truly feel, and they're like they miss each other a lot, which you could just, you know, hearken that to they're at the beginning of their romance, right? They obviously like it's going to be awkward at the beginning. That's just how romances go. But it's very interesting to me how intentional it is that they keep kind of almost missing each other. Like they almost get to the same page and then they just kind of are a little bit off.
They don't even kiss at the end. They like hug. It's like they're going in for a kiss and then they don't.
Yeah. I'll get to that. That's one of my points. But so in the next scene, you know, Simon finds the note in the book, right? And Betty's note is like, oh, I want to travel the world with you, and
I wanna what is it, the Russian subtitle of the Owl House said?
Oh, I wanna make friends and travel together or whatever whatever the Owl House translation was. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, and even like this idea of them like, oh, I wanted to keep it professional, oh, I'm gonna leave like a note in the book, right? Like they're not able to like talk to each other directly, which I thought was just like interesting. And so yeah,
Dress up
they
and travel together. That's what it is too. And dress up and
yes,
travel together.
dress up and travel together. Yes, that's what it was. Thank you. um, and then you know, and to your point again, during that whole scene where they are listening to the song and they're like, very romantically sitting with each other, right? Like Betty, throughout this entire scene, she keeps going for the kiss. She keeps trying to go for it, but there's always something that prevents her, like the firefly coming in the way. And then Simon, puts his hand on her cheek and you think that he's going to go for the kiss, but he just like brushes her hair to the side and she like leans forward, goes for the kiss, right? But then she like falls into his arms and then they just embrace. And yes, it's very cute and you could read that as like it's the awkward first interaction of first romance and everything. But the song lyrics, I think someone said this in the chat too, right? Who said this in the chat? I want to give you credit for that. Someone said in the chat. I'm sorry. I can't find it now. But the song lyrics I think are very intentional too, right? I wrote this down. Though you got your dreams, I got everything in you, and I'll be there through all the reveries because I believe in you more than I ever believed in me. And maybe this is killing a part of me, but it ain't called love without a little bit of tragedy, right? So this idea of Betty sacrificing herself, of her losing herself in the relationship, right? We get that moment with Fionna and Simon too, right? Where Fiona's like, wow. And so you got on the bus with her after that? And Simon's like, yeah, wait, no, I didn't. Why would I do that? Right. And we get like completely interrupted by that. But, I feel like that moment is really important, right? Like we are meant to acknowledge the problems with this relationship here. Why didn't Simon get on that bus with her? That would have made the most logical sense. They wanted to go on adventures together, right?
But instead she gave up her life.
And instead she gave up everything and like didn't even get a kiss after that.
Man,
And
didn't
so
even get laid for it.
yeah, and so I really don't know how this series is going to wrap up their relationship because now we're introducing this idea of Betty is losing herself in this relationship and she has completely lost herself, right? At the end of the Adventure Time series finale, right? She has completely succumbed and absorbed herself into Golb and so she's completely lost herself now. So what is the show trying to say about their relationship and how is this going to play out? What is their conversation going to be like at the end? And like, are they going to acknowledge these problems? Are they going to bring Betty back? Is she going to go in a different direction? I don't think they're going to end up together by the end of this. That doesn't feel right, but
It's interesting to see people in the chat kind of coming around on it. It's clever, isn't it? It's like
yeah.
they're playing a great big trick on us, and like I don't want to call people undiscerning because that sounds mean, but for lack of a better term, the less discerning viewers take it at face value, right? Because it's like, look how cute it is. Look at the fireflies. It's very easy to be emotionally manipulated.
Yes,
right?
Absolutely.
Which is what they're doing, but they're not doing it in what appears to be a cynical way for me, because there are just too many little bits that just
I completely
deliberately
agree.
don't quite add up.
Yeah.
For it to be like a completely sincere attempt at emotional manipulation, right? And you can almost feel yourself getting swept up in it, can't you? Like the shots of them looking out over the city with the fireflies. But
Yeah, absolutely.
the whole time I just kept thinking like, well, this is certainly one of the relationships of all time.
Right. Absolutely. 100%.
Where like, especially compared to, like this is itself a version of Simon that we've not yet seen before. And when you compare it to how like sufficient and upfront and honest and competent he is as a dad, he comes across as an absolute bitch ass nerd in the realm of romance.
Totally.
Like it doesn't feel like, it feels like a very uncharacteristically flat romance for Adventure Time, because Adventure Time has always taken romance very seriously.
Yeah.
And it's always been very subversive of certain gendered tropes, shall we say.
Absolutely. For sure.
Yeah. And that starts with Finn and Princess Bubblegum. where it's like, oh, it doesn't matter that she's like several years older than him. He covets the princess, and the
He's the
princess will
hero,
eventually
right? Yeah.
love him. He's here, and it's like, no,
That's not how it
you know.
works. Yep.
And it's very clever because not only does it look at his behavior, it also looks at Princess Bubblegum, and it's like, is she a princess that's worth coveting in traditional fairy tale sensibilities? Like, she's got her own messy things that she needs to figure out before she's ready to enter
Yep.
a relationship with anyone. You know, like
Also, she's a lesbian, but
also she's but do you understand my point is, like,
yes, yeah,
she was not ready for a relationship with Marceline
or anyone,
at the
yeah,
beginning of the series, right?
for sure.
She needs to grow a lot before she enters a space where she's ready for that, and obviously something happened between her and Marceline and her share equal blame, I think. But like then you get all the stuff with Finn and Flame Princess, and like Adventure Time has always taken that relationship between men and women with a certain pinch of salt.
Totally, absolutely.
Where there are fantastical ways that relationships work, and these are dangerous myths. Really, like young men fall for these myths all the time. These dangerous myths about the way women are supposed to behave. The idea that there'll be a meet cute and everything will be perfect. And it's like, well, actually, you kind of just need to talk to people.
Right.
Just talk to them like human beings in candid, normal ways. And the most successful relationships we see in Adventure Time come out of just normal, sincere, honest dialogue between people.
Totally. Absolutely.
And that's impossible to ignore when, but one episode ago, you've got Marshall Lee and Gary.
Exactly.
Who are like the polar opposite. Where it's like where Gary's like, I'm not gonna let you give up everything for me. Like, that's not how this works.
Totally.
I care about
100%.
you too. It's not how this works.
Absolutely.
And then fast forward an episode, and it's like this romantic lovey-dovey. Isn't it great? She's given up her life,
giving up everything for him. Yeah.
And it's yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. I didn't even connect it back to the Gumlee romance. 100%.
And the thing is that you and I think in very similar ways. So the whole time I was watching all of that, those exact same things were going on in my head. And I'm like, this doesn't feel like Adventure Time.
This doesn't feel right. Yeah, exactly. I have one more very compelling piece of evidence to kind of put the nail in the coffin of why we're not supposed to be thinking of this as like a beautiful, wholesome, wonderful romance. So you talked about this idea of like communicating, right? And this idea that like, if we could just talk about our feelings in a blunt way, like it could solve a lot of our problems, right? In this episode, Fionna does end up finding the ice crown, right? She finds it halfway through the episode, but she keeps it a secret, right? She keeps it to herself because she is conflicted. She has these like conflicting intentions, right? Like she wants to, go back to her magical world, etc. That was the plan to set off with. But now that she has seen the truth of the Ice King, she feels guilty. She doesn't want to curse Simon again and make him into the Ice King. And so
what a loser he is.
Yes, exactly. And so she doesn't want to do that to him, right? And so she's conflicted. She keeps the secret to herself. And in this heated moment, right, where Cake yells at her, she goes out onto the balcony and starts crying, right? And she doesn't talk about it. She doesn't talk about what she's feeling. She doesn't talk about her inner conflict. She doesn't talk about like, oh, I have the crown, but I don't know what to do with it. I don't know. I don't want to put it on you, right? If they had a conversation here, then this next thing would not have happened, right? And what was the next thing that happened? Simon tries to comfort Fionna once again by going into the flashback, by going into his romance, into his story. And that's when we get like kind of the peak of the romance of it, right? Where they are at the bus stop and we get this beautiful confession, and it's like this sweeping, beautiful moment. And what happens after that? That is what inspires BMO to try to fix the remote. This beautiful love story is directly what causes BMO to try to fix the remote. And we all know.
Because he was built to be more.
And we all know how that turned out. We all saw how that went.
Why couldn't it have been me? I would have taken that bullet.
So if we are supposed to believe that this beautiful love story is what inspired BMO to use his heart of a hero, and it ended like that, with the most upsetting and horrifying popping sound you will ever hear in your entire life, I feel like
it's not the most You haven't seen enough horror films to know what the most upsetting popping sound is you've ever heard in your
Okay.
life, but I do. And let me tell you, that wasn't it. But it was very
It
sad.
was very sad. So I feel like we're not supposed to be seeing that beautiful romantic moment as something that we are supposed to take
It.
away with good feelings and
The
you
thing is,
know.
like, there's a comment I'd like to talk about because it's you know captioned as a joke, but I think there's a truth to it, which is that this is why gay romance is always superior. And like, I want to talk about that a little bit
Sure, yeah.
because it's like my own queerness is not why I prefer gay romance, right? In media, the reason is that gay romance has to actually write the romance, right?
Right.
It's not something that's taken for granted, right? In heteronormative society, in the heteronormative and amongst the heteronormative audience members, the what is it? Avril Lavigne says he was a boy, she was a girl. What more is there to say? That's literally all it takes, and they
Yeah.
will root for that without even really thinking about it. If they're two attractive people, and the movie says they belong together, that's honestly 9 times out of 10 that's enough. And I've been watching this new Superman series, which I like just fine. I appreciate the kind of magical girl approach to Superman. I think it's fun, but like it really is just like Lois Lane and Clark Kent. They belong
Right.
together, I guess, and it's so bland. Like they're to get like at the end of like 5 episodes, they're already a thing, and it doesn't. And I'm not here for having romances be on and on again, off again, or like do the Ross and Racheling teasing us for a whole season. It's just like 5 episodes. Really, is that all we get? You know, because so much of this is taken for granted, and that doesn't mean that's how it has to be.
Right.
Because there are some great, there are some great what you could loosely call straight relationships in media. My brain obviously immediately defaults to Stephen and Connie, which is a relationship written with a tremendous amount of emotional honesty and sensitivity, and you know, Rebecca Sugar's a fantastic writer who understands how people are, and Stephen not being a heteronormative masculine figure really helps the success of that relationship in terms of what they have to do with the writing of it. And they do reversal with it as well. There are like little bits that feel like clever, fun reversal. Excuse me. I love the bit when they're dancing together for the first time on the beach and alone together, and they do that little spin, and instead of the man being the one to sort of hold the woman as she ducks down, it's like the other way around and stuff like that. But like that relationship in general is written with so much emotional honesty, and they support one another so strongly as friends first, you know, as just two people who care about each other before romance even comes into it, you know. And it's clear from the start that Stephen has a crush on her from like the very first episode she's introduced, when he's making an ass out of himself with his bicycle. But
Hmm.
it's just that like this with Simon and Betty is a really good example of how many people take these things at face value and don't think about them.
Right.
He was a boy, she was a girl. What more is there to say? But then you actually start to break it down and like, wait a minute.
There's actually a lot we could say here.
There's a lot we could say. There's a lot we could say
No,
here. This
exactly.
isn't
Exactly.
healthy. But you know, I believe it's purposeful in this case. There's just too much going on underneath it for it to not be purposeful.
No, absolutely.
Um, but yeah, but there is unfortunately a kernel of truth. You know,
Yeah.
generally gay romances in media have to feel like they have to prove themselves.
Right.
Don't
Right.
they? They have to prove themselves in some shape or form to varying degrees of success.
So
But
true. So true.
make that what you will.
All right. Well, those are kind of all of my big buckets I wanted to talk about, I think.
Crab buckets.
My crab buckets.
Crab, fuck it. Tune will get that. Tune will get that joke.
I do want to acknowledge just a few small things if just going through my notes here. First I just want to give a shout out to like the background artists who have been just killing it this entire series. Like all the little background details like that I've been noticing have not only been, you know, just so awesome, but they've also been hilarious. Like in this vampire world, all the like graffiti in the background being all like vampire related, being like eat garlic and stuff like that was so clever and fun. And also I didn't
I
notice
didn't
this
even think about that.
I didn't notice this before too, but like, so Fionna and Cake's world is supposed to be kind of like glitching out a little bit too, right? And so like all of the background details are all like all the billboard signs just say stuff like sign. Like it's all very generic, right? It's all like filler text. There's one bit of graffiti in the Fionna and Cake universe that says lorem ipsum, and when I saw
This is
that
the placeholder text.
I
didn't
cracked
even notice
up.
that.
That was so funny to me. I thought that was so clever and funny. So I just wanted to give a shout out to the background artists. They're just so good, so hilarious.
Is lorem ipsum like real Latin, or is it like fake Latin?
I genuinely have no idea. I only know it as filler text, right? So
Is lorem ipsum nonsense? Yeah, it has the appearance of an intelligent Latin idiom, but it's actually nonsense.
It's just nonsense, yeah.
It was my understanding that it's I don't speak Latin, but I know enough Latin to look at lorem ipsum and be like, some of these words don't make sense.
Quick note about Hynden Walsh fucking also continuing to kill it in these episodes. Her like gruff, soldier PB voice was so funny, and her like whenever she said like the silly words, she's like, I call them garbos, or like you dum dums or whatever, right? Like it just cracked me up. Like she's so funny and so good. I just love it. She's just incredible.
Still easily the most underrated voice actor maybe ever.
Yeah, she's a legend.
Maybe ever.
And her range in the series, like she's really been like showcasing.
Yeah, with the candy, I didn't even recognize her as the Candy Queen at first. I was like, Jesus.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So that was awesome. Oh, we didn't really talk about the Scarab at all in this episode, or these two episodes. There's a lot of plotty stuff going on with him.
Yeah, the Scarab kind of is not the most important part of this stuff. He's obviously going through some arc, which is going to be quickly resolved.
Yeah, but I think it's fun. It's interesting, like Scarab being this character where he's like a stickler for the rules, right? But like everyone else is like, oh no, Prismo, he's a cool guy. We let him do what he wants, right? But he's just like, no, I gotta stick to the rules. But then the big boss, ends up being on his side, right? And of course, that's a whole mystery that we'll find out more about. I always get the impression
he's a bit jealous of Prismo in a way.
Yeah, well, we know that from the beginning, right? He's really going after Prismo because he wants to be the Wishmaster, right? And now we're kind of getting this idea, right, that maybe it's like a little bit more personal than we thought it was at the beginning, right? Because he sees Prismo as this character. Like Prismo has all these friends. He invites people to parties, notably that the Scarab does not get invited to those parties, right? So I feel like the Scarab is just kind of, he's like that narc kid, right? Like in your classroom that like tattletales on everybody, but like wants friends, but nobody likes because he's such a narc, right? So I feel like that's
what's the character's name in Recess? Is it Randall?
Oh, I think you're right. I think it's Randall.
He's like somewhere between Randall and, I hate that I'm going to say this because I hate this show, Dwight Schrute from The Office.
Yes.
He's got a lot of Dwight Schrute in him. I hate that I've seen enough of the US Office to know that, and I hate the US Office and it's trash. But he is basically Dwight Schrute, pretty much.
Yeah. A fun little callback or Easter egg, I think this was. I don't think that this is going to come into play, but one of the calls that the Scarab ignores when, he's trying to go after Fionna and Cake is
rent. It's like his rent due.
No, there was one where he's like, because he's supposed to be like auditing the gods, right? And so like there's one thing that pops up where it's the cosmic owl, and it says that he's profiteering, which I just thought was really funny. I miss the cosmic owl. He's such a fun character.
Is Emmett Walsh even still alive?
I don't know. I genuinely don't know.
Emmett Walsh is so old. There's another Blade Runner connection, everybody. Emmett Walsh, who voices the Cosmic Owl. One of his most famous movie performances is in Blade Runner 1982. He's the police chief.
There you go.
One of the best lines in the movie and one of the best lines of all time. If you're not cop, you're little people. I love that line. He is 88 years old and he's still going. Somehow he's still going.
Yep. Wow. Incredible.
So he could come back. We could have more Emmett Walsh as the Cosmic Owl.
That would be amazing.
There you go.
Yeah. Bluey's dad, the voice actor, played Orbo apparently, which is fun.
I have not really watched Bluey. Bluey is a little too young for me.
Yeah.
Just a
Um,
little too young. I respect Bluey, but it's just not quite. It's a baby show.
but yeah, but also just like all the character designs for all these like interdimensional weird beings, like they're so non-human, right? Like there's such classic like
Biblically accurate angels.
yeah, there's such like classic Adventure Timey designs too. I think my favorite was like the Venn diagram headed guy where like the eye that's in the middle is the one that's open. I don't know, they're just fun designs. I just really like them.
Mm. It's
Um
it's funny you get that kind of juxtaposition between the kind of normalcy of the situation and the outlandishness of the designs.
right, right. But
Where it's
like
basically just a waiting room.
yeah, but at the same time, like the Scarab is such he's like a weirdly grounded character, you know. Like I said, he's just like that
He's basically
asshole
just wearing a
narc.
weird suit.
Yeah. That we all know and love, right? From real life. Let's
I love
see.
any narcs.
Let's see. Was there anything else in my notes here? Da, 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 da. Um, yeah, we talked about Simon and Betty.
You know, I actually own. I'm too lazy to bring it fully into view, but I do own an M65 field jacket.
There we go.
Here it is. I also own. This is me being a weird fashion kid. I also own an M55. I think this is field jacket. I have a couple of field jackets.
I thought it was
I'm a dork.
because you're a dork. I thought it was particularly sad as well too how BMO noted that even football had not been around for many years because again, BMO like football, it's always been kind of like ambiguous, right? Whether football was actually real or whether it was just BMO's imagination. But I interpret football as like a culmination of BMO's imagination, and the fact that even that is dead is just really sad.
Yeah, BMO. I mean, the difference between BMO and the rest of the Mo's is that BMO is built with a sense of fun.
Yes, yes.
And now BMO's dead,
Um,
and I'm dead.
I have a note here that you know that moment where BMO finds the tape and he's like, "Ooh, butt stuff." I just have a note here that says, "Wow, Fionna and Cake really taking advantage of their TV-14 rating."
I didn't catch the last part of that. You cut out.
I said when BMO said butt stuff, I felt like that was Fionna and Cake really taking advantage of their TV-14 rating.
I will only believe that when they say fuck stuff.
Let's see. Oh yeah, we didn't really talk about the Cheers theme at the end too, but you kind of touched on that. Cheers as the motif of the mundane and all that good stuff.
Making your way in the world today
takes everything you got, man. Yeah, I think that was pretty much it. Like I mentioned before, so Simon and Betty, the way that their relationship is going to conclude, I really have no idea because we're getting this idea of Betty as a character that is very impulsive, very rash, ready to lose herself and sacrifice herself for this man that she is putting up on
Eminem reference we've made in a single stream.
Yes. And she's like putting this man on a pedestal and she's like willing to lose herself in this relationship, right? And like meanwhile we're seeing Simon kind of falling along the same path, right? Where he is convinced himself, right, that becoming the Ice King is this like act of martyrdom where he's gonna like save Fionna and Cake and he's gonna do this like selfless act and all this stuff. But deep down, like we know his true motivation is actually truly selfish, right? Like he's trying to lose himself and escape his grief and his pain in the music and the madness, right?
It's kind of interesting, isn't it, how the Lich in a weird way parallels Simon.
Yeah.
The Liches doggedly pursued this one goal and achieved it. And now they're depressed because it wasn't what it was all they thought it was going to be.
So like
and,
what?
No doubt that would be the case for Simon if he became the Ice King again. Like he has this idea in his head of how good it would be, but it wouldn't be good.
Exactly. And so I'm just so curious about how this is going to play out. Like because are we going to get Betty separated from Golb? But like I don't think that she's going to end up with Simon. That just doesn't feel right. yeah, I don't know. It's just gonna be really interesting to see the way that this plays out, because I feel like the both of these characters are, you know, people who are willing to, again, chase that fantasy, lose themselves for this
In the
idea of the
music
relationship,
moment.
right? Yes. But yeah, I don't know. I really, I'm nervous. I'm excited for how next week is going to play out. I think I'm going to cry probably. Um,
I think I'm gonna die.
that's my only prediction, is that I'm going to cry. And Tom is going to die. Those are our two
Is
predictions.
Flame Princess hasn't showed up at all, has she?
We haven't seen Flame Princess. We only saw that glimpse of DJ Flame from the
Which
first
is not, it's
episode.
not the same.
Yeah.
Um, be curious to see if she does in any shape or form. We even got a little Susan Strong, a little
Yeah.
glimpse of Susan Strong, but no Flame Princess.
Yeah, no Flame Princess yet. Yeah, I don't know if Finn is going to come back. I don't know if any of these characters that we kind of like abandoned are going to come back, like Baby Finn or anything like that. Like, I don't know. I feel like Baby Finn in Vampire World, like the way that I interpret it now is like, oh, maybe that world has some hope now because it has a hero, and maybe Baby Finn will find this world's version of Jake and things will get better. Because I feel like something that's important to Fiona's arc as well too is the fact that she's like making all these mistakes and she's feeling like she's hurting people, but she is actually inadvertently doing some good along the way too, right? Like when she freed Candy Queen from the curse, right? Like that could be considered a good thing that she did. When she what did she do before that? In Farm World, she technically exposed the romance to Finn, and it like ended up being okay, right? And so like that's kind of a good thing that happened there. Um so I feel like, along the way she is doing a little bit of good here and there, and maybe that's like the ripple effect of what Baby Finn in Vampire World is going to be. And I don't know if that's going to play a role in her arc, her acknowledging like, yes, she made mistakes, but she also did some things right. I don't know. It's just, yeah, I don't know if Baby Finn or any of those kind of like abandoned threads are going to get picked up again, right? Because we have so much to cover in these last two episodes with Betty and Simon, and Fiona going back into her world. Like, is Cake gonna still be magical when they go back into the world? We don't know, right? Like, because
There's just a lot.
that's the other thing that I think is so like complex and interesting. Like they added like this layer of complexity here, right? Because like at the beginning of the show, and as we got through like to episode, the Winter King episode, where we saw like, oh, Fiona obviously has to come back to reality from her fantasy. But now, we think that she's going to go back into her world and sort of like learn this lesson of like, accept the mundanity of life and find happiness where you can. But now there's this like added layer of complexity where like, well, Cake doesn't deserve to go back to her unspeaking house cat version of herself, right? So like, is she going to stay magical in this world? And is there going to be some version of magic, present in this world still? So yeah, there's this like added layer of like questioning I have now, where it's like, well, this doesn't seem like it's going to go the way I thought it was, because that doesn't feel right, because it doesn't feel right to have Kate go back to a normal cat after all this. So yeah, I really don't know what to expect from this finale, or like what's going to happen.
I don't know. It's hard to say, isn't it? I mean, Kiki's delivery service springs to mind, because Kiki's delivery service, not a lot of people know this, and I believe this is something that was deliberately changed for the US release because Americans are stupid. Sorry. They changed it so that Gigi at the end of Kiki's delivery service gets his voice back. Because there's that period of the movie where she can't talk to him. In the Japanese version, that's actually not the case. And it's implied really that Gigi never gets his voice back, and maybe that Gigi could never talk to begin with, and that Gigi was kind of imaginary, or at the very least that part of her connection with Gigi is gone forever as she's transitioned into the period of her life, which adds like a bittersweet tinge to the ending of Kiki's delivery service. In Japanese, that obviously the in the US they didn't think American audiences would like very much, and they were probably right. But I don't know. Could be something like that.
Yeah, could be, right? Like maybe Fiona has like a new appreciation for Cake now, because, she can't talk. And, because like at the beginning of episode 1, right, when she was like, oh, you better not be sick because that's the last thing we need right now, right? Like, I don't know, maybe she just like will have a different relationship with her cat now. And, in the same way that, Gary has his purpose of, trying to open his bakery, maybe now Fionna finds purpose in taking care of her cat. I don't know. That's the way my life is right now. That's the only thing that gives me purpose is taking care of my cat. The only thing that keeps me going to work and, earning money so I can make sure that I can feed her at the end of the day. So yeah, I don't know. Like, so I don't know. In that way, Fionna is extremely relatable. So yeah, so I don't know. It's just it'll be interesting. I have full faith in the writers though. I feel like they've not only matched my expectations but succeeded my expectations so far with this miniseries, and I feel like no matter what happens, I'm gonna enjoy it and I'm going to cry probably. So I'm just so excited to see.
We'll just have to see.
We'll just have to wait and see. Okay, apparently one of the episodes is extra length too, which is nice.
That's nice. I like that. I like it when they do that. Give me more content.
Yes. Give me more. Oh yeah, we didn't talk about Huntress's death. NMD brought that up in the chat. We didn't. That was just sad. That was such a heartbreaking image.
Will ever be as sad as BMO.
Yeah, BMO's death was freaking heartbreaking. Oh yeah, and BMO turning back into the alarm clock right at the last second too, right?
That hurt me. They didn't have to do that.
They didn't have to do that. That was so cruel. Oh, we can fix him, right? No. Yeah, that was heartbreaking. Yeah, and we also don't know how that's going to come into play too, right? With Fionna and Cake normalizing different things across the multiverse. Obviously that came into play with the Winter King episode, but if that's going to come into play in the finale, we don't know exactly how, but we'll just have to wait and see. I'm
have to wait
excited. I've not been this invested in a show in a really long time, so I'm really excited to watch these last episodes and finish out these streams with all of you guys. I can't believe it's almost over too. This has been so much fun. I've really enjoyed doing these weekly discussions again with you, Tom. We need to start planning what our next venture is going to be, because after this is over,
probably Buffy.
Yeah, we got to do something. Probably Buffy. That'll be fun. We need to get back to She-Ra at some point too.
Indeedy.
Lots to come. But for now, we are almost at the end of this adventure, which is sad, but I'm really looking forward to seeing how this story concludes.
Every time we do this, we always end with the "we'll just have to wait and see" bit, because it's like,
because what else can we say?
Genuinely quite difficult to predict exactly where they're going with this.
Yeah, exactly.
But I'm happy they've taken the everything everywhere all at once approach to the multiverse and not the boring, bland, mediocre MCU approach to the multiverse.
Yeah.
That's all I can say about that.
Yeah. Alrighty, y'all. Well, thank you all again for hanging out. Yes, I'm gonna miss Fionna and Cake as well when it ends too, Magical. I'll be quite sad, but I'm happy we're getting this story. I feel like it's really amazing, and the Adventure Time crew is really flexing like the best that they are able to do. Right? I feel like this is a common thing, and maybe this is just recency bias, but I feel like this is like the best Adventure Time maybe has ever been.
I don't know if I could go that far. I don't think it's necessarily fair to compare the two for a start.
It's hard to compare. Yeah.
This mode of storytelling is very different. It's
no, yeah, for sure.
It's akin to the miniseries that they did, but not quite the same. And the miniseries, like those miniseries, that's a tall order. How do you interject a miniseries into the middle of a long running show that where it can't realistically be as cut and dry as a one shot where it has a specific beginning and a specific end. They need to carry on after that, and follow up with other things, and it's the first time they'd really tried with that formula in Adventure Time, and 10 episodes but only 10 minutes a pop, that's tough for those kinds of stories. Infinity Train did it, but Infinity Train's different because Infinity Train is sort of closer to seasonal one shots because the stories are only tangentially connected. You know, you're always with a kind of storytelling like this, you're always going to get something that is quite simply more comprehensive
Right, of
than a
course.
show that has to have a weekly release, season by season. What a monster of the week are we fighting this time,
Right.
guys? We're
No, yeah, of
writing stories
course.
for kids. Kids' attention spans are shorter. The amount of time they get per slot is shorter. You know, um, it's just different. So
No,
it's
yeah,
not.
I completely agree with that. I
This is
think, yeah,
this is the most comprehensive a batch of episodes of Adventure Time have ever been.
sure.
Would I say it's the best Adventure Time's ever been? I don't think that's fair. I will always stand by I Remember You and Simon Marcy being some of the finest
Sure. That's
television
completely fair. I
I've
think
ever seen, and I stand by that,
I
even
think
even after all of this.
that is completely fair. I think regardless of whether you think that this is the best or your favorite of Adventure Time or whatever, the crew is clearly firing on all cylinders, and there's like they're not holding back, and they're just like doing an amazing job. And I feel like that is,
Certainly very good. Yeah,
yeah,
there's
that
no
is
doubt
without
about that.
doubt. Yeah, definitely it's awesome to see, like Jay was saying in the chat, like it's awesome to see the show grow up with its audience in this way too, which is really, really cool.
Which is hard to do,
It's
to be
hard.
honest.
It's
That's
not easy, and
that's
they're
difficult.
brilliantly navigating that thin line, which is really awesome.
You know, Samurai Jack tried to do that and mostly succeeded.
Mhm. Mhm.
Didn't do it perfectly. You know, Samurai Jack at season 5, was it? Was it season 5?
Yeah.
Struggled to balance some of the old humor. And I always found it really, really tonally jarring with Samurai Jack, where it'd be like, okay, here's this story about Jack contemplating committing suicide. And then, hey, here's this goofy robot who hasn't changed a bit since the
Right.
original show, who's just ahead now and he's going on these goofy adventures trying to get back to Aku. And it's like, it's the tonal dissonance just doesn't fit.
Totally. Yeah. I getcha.
Where I really feel like it would have served that season a lot better if they'd just gone balls to the
Dark.
wall on the dark part
Yeah.
of it and just sat with that. With Adventure Time, it's always ridden that, it's straddled that line, even when it was just a kid's show, it
Yeah.
straddled that line.
Yeah.
So it kind of it feels much more natural for it to be able to have
Totally.
scenes that are simultaneously miserable but also funny because it just fits into the formula so
Totally,
much more comfortably.
totally. And like
You know,
seeing them say words like crap and badass and stuff like that, like it just feels like it fits. Like
it's
it feels
I
so
think
natural.
probably the most famous example of a story that aged with its audience is the Wizard series, which again, kind of like the deeper into its own self-seriousness it gets, the more it begins to buckle under the weight of its own
For sure.
messy writing
For sure.
and messy lore, and the more it starts trying to appeal to an older audience, the more that older audience begins to notice the cracks in a way that they don't when it's just a kid's story that you
Right.
can sort of just suspend your disbelief.
But
This
this
has
series is
pretty much
really,
done a perfect
yeah,
job of it, really.
really, really good. Yeah, incredible. I really give kudos to the writers. Like this is how you age up a show for an audience. I feel like this is like the gold standard now.
And it's understanding that like aging up a show is more than just making something mature.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, it's more than just like you don't just take the same writing and just add gore and swear words to
Right.
it.
Exactly.
You know, the reason Samurai Jack was a mostly successful attempt at doing that was because it took those themes which people over the age of 18 or 20 can really identify with, which is you're getting a bit older, life isn't what you thought it was going to be. You might be experiencing depression for the first time in your life.
Maybe some loss, right? You
Some
lost your
loss, yeah.
friends or your pets or something, right?
You know, you've lost a job. You've told someone you never want to see him again. Just like these things, these little bits of life
Yeah.
that you accrue as you get older, you know, and that start to blinker out the good stuff. Uh, this is like that, you know. As
Yeah.
soon as you switch on that first episode, you're like, okay, Okay, I see what they're doing here. Like, they're really coming after me.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I know. This whole mini series has felt like such a personal attack. It's not even funny. Oh my god. Yeah, but yeah, I'm really enjoying it. I'm so excited and nervous and not ready for the conclusion of this, but we will be here next week again, one final time to discuss these last 2 episodes. I'm really looking forward to it. Thank you, Tom, for being my buddy and talking about these episodes with me every week. After I watch these episodes, all I want to do is talk about them. So I'm so grateful for this space that we've created, and for you being my good friend and willing to talk to me about these apps. It's if I was just sitting here talking to the chat, it would be a lot more awkward. So I appreciate you being there to bounce ideas off of, and to of course add your own thoughts too, because you connected some brilliant dots today, and I really appreciate you. And thank you as well to the chat as well. Sorry, were you gonna say something?
I was gonna say to show people my cool jackets.
Oh yeah,
I've still got my Steven
your
jacket
Steven
here.
jacket. Yep. But yeah, thank you all as well in the chat as well too. You all have been so great, and with your thoughts and theories and feelings and everything as usual. I really appreciate you being here every week this week. I didn't say this while I noticed this, but I did notice at one point OBS told me that 12 people were watching. And so if that is true, again, I never know how accurate my software is, but if 12 people were watching, that is, I think, a new record for us, which is awesome. So thank you again so much for watching, everyone. It's been such a blast discussing these episodes with y'all, and it's been great to hear your guys' thoughts every week as we come together as well too. It's been so much fun. I'm gonna be sad when this is over, but we will of course be back next week for the final episodes, and we'll figure out what comes next for discussion streams after that. I hope you'll join us along for the ride.
I'm very eager to get started with the Buffy discussion streams. I know we haven't finished Buffy yet, but I've been thinking a lot about Buffy lately. It's really been on my mind.
Oh, really?
I just want to strike. I want to strike while that iron's hot. Buffy, yeah, because Buffy. I don't want to get too much into it, but Buffy has sort of fallen into the general space in my brain where like George Romero films go.
My plan is working, man.
Which is really the greatest compliment I can give anything, because I fucking love George Romero.
Yeah.
But yeah, we should do that.
For sure.
I'll be up. I don't want to say pretty soon, because that'd be a lie. But I'm
officially
halfway through my Steven Universe video, and that will be coming.
Yes.
At some point, I wrote a song. I don't know if that entices anybody.
It's so good.
I wrote a song to go with this video, because it just felt right. It felt like I can't make.
It's really good.
I was thinking about it for the longest time. I was like, I want to include a piece of music in this somehow. And I initially thought, like, what if I did a piece of like backing music? But I thought no one's going to notice backing music. It's just going to be there, But it feels wrong to make a video about such a musical show written by such a musical person and not.
Yo, Tom is so talented. Music. Tom has all these like skills and abilities, and he writes music, and
that's provided the music is actually good.
It is good. It's great, and I love it. I'm excited for the video. Yeah, if you are not.
Tune actually did help me finish the song in a fairly significant way. Nice. Actually, I sent like 4 versions of the song to Tune. I was like, I can't figure out which version I want to do, and Tune was like, okay, well, this line here you should have the harmony in that line there, and then cut the harmony out for that line there and remix it.
Oh, nice! That's awesome.
That's how we got that, but maybe it's a bad song, but you will.
No, it's great. I'm excited.
At the very least, be guaranteed to hear an original song written by me.
Yep.
In this video.
Subscribe if you're not.
Felt thoroughly compelled to write after hearing Part of the Madness, which still has not been released.
They need to release all the songs.
Form, I'm so mad.
They need to do the soundtrack. Release the soundtrack.
Where is Part of the Madness? Give it to me. Put it in my mouth.
Hopefully, once the series is done, they release the soundtrack properly.
Because I'm gonna lose my mind. I'm gonna launch the nukes, guys. This is gonna be it. This is what is gonna. I know a guy on the inside. Okay. This is how you want it to end, Cartoon Network. So you want this to go?
It's their own doing, 100%. Already,
it's true, Jay. The guitar behind me is not just for show. Okay, one more thing.
Yes, yes.
Because this is always here, and I feel like people need to see it. Look at this beautiful. I need to switch.
It is beautiful. You have a beautiful guitar.
Look at this beautiful mother of pearl, uh, mother of pearl fretboard
Yeah, it's
design.
gorgeous.
So beautiful. This is actually not the guitar that I used to record it though. But yes, I love this guitar.
Nice.
Okay, that's it. I'm done. I'm done showing off.
Yeah, yeah. Hopefully they release the series, or the soundtrack rather, once the series is done. Because I've also been listening to freaking Candy Queen song on repeat. That song is way too catchy than it has any right to be.
I just feel like they could at least release the, like, I get that releasing the soundtrack all at once could spoil something in the final episodes, but they could at least release the songs like week by week.
Come on,
But they're
come on,
not
come on,
doing
guys,
that.
get on it, get on it.
They're blue balling us.
That's specifically
Hate
because of
that.
you, Tom.
It's as soon as they heard that I wanted it, they were like, "Oh, God,
we gotta
I
hold
hate
it back."
you."
Yeah.
Adam Muter was like, "I know that kid. I met him once at the Safeway.
Oh my gosh.
I didn't like the smell of the deodorant he was using." And
oh my god. Okay, we clearly have to wrap this up. We're going off on all these weird tangents now. We clearly got to end the stream now. Thank you all again for hanging out. We really appreciate you. We will see you all next week at our usual time to talk about the last 2 episodes of Fionna and Cake. I can't wait. I'm excited. I'm going to cry. We're all going to cry together. I'm looking forward to it. All right. See you all then. Take care. Have a good week. Bye-bye.
Bye.